Welcome Friday 15 with Master B2B. Rocking out on a Friday morning. My name is Brian Beck. I'm here with Andy Hoare, my co-founder of the Master B2B Thought Leadership Series and community of e-commerce professionals across the galaxy. Andy, welcome to Friday 15.
Great to be here.
We had an exciting week or week and a half here, with our summit. We're going to talk about a recap today. But before we get into that, Andy, I want to talk a little bit about some breaking news. Where's my cool sound? There it is. Andy, did you see this? We've been following this story for a couple of years now. Amazon is having this ongoing spat with the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which is a federal government agency. And what happened last year, mid 2024, is that the Consumer Product Safety Commission ruled that Amazon is a distributor, and as a distributor, they are now responsible for the goods, the safety of the goods that are sold through their marketplace, even though Amazon never owns them. If you're selling 3P or third party on Amazon, you put your products up for sale. Amazon never buys them. You're just selling them through Amazon. But this agency said, hey, you know what? You're responsible for that. Well, now Amazon turned around and sued them, sue them back. Amazon has long disputed it qualifies as a distributor of its products offered by other sellers. In a lawsuit filed this week, the company maintained it serves as a third-party logistics provider and therefore should not be held liable for recalls of product that were made, owned, or sold by others. Andy, reactions?
Yeah, so now the hunter is the hunted. I think it's a new political environment. Amazon's feeling emboldened,
Yeah.
and they're thinking maybe in a different world they can get these guys to back down. I mean, it's an interesting debate. We've talked about it a lot,
Yep.
and I do think this is going to be kind of a landmark case because Amazon's not alone. I mean, this is every site that has any marketplace capability.
Right. That's right.
That drop ships from anybody else is not going to be determined to either be liable or not liable. And there are good arguments on both sides. I mean, I applaud Amazon for doing what I would do the same thing if I were them. I'd say, wait a minute.
Nope.
Let's see if we can get this thing done now with a more favorable administration and see what happens.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll continue to follow this because I think it's fascinating and it's a new area of e-commerce. And Amazon, is going to set a precedent here for or whatever happens in this case. These cases will set a precedent. All right, Andy, we had our Mindshare Summit last week in Chicago at the University of Chicago, and oh my gosh, what a fabulous event! It was over 100 people. It was really just a fantastic group. We, in a setting which was really a graduate school type setting. We rented the whole sixth floor at the Gleacher Center, which is right on the river in the middle of downtown Chicago. Really fabulous setting. And we had folks from manufacturers, distributors. About 80% of the people there were practitioners, active practitioners, and we had about 20% were from solution providers, software companies, and systems integrators and agencies and such. But vast majority were VPs of e-commerce, directors of e-commerce. We had a whole host of C-level executives there, CTOs, CMOs, people like that. So really what a great group that gathered, Andy. Any reactions to the quality of the attendees?
Yeah, we've been doing this for years. You know that I was involved in an event, B2B Next, for several
Right.
years. I've been to every event in the B2B e-commerce space, going back 10, 12 years. We decided we wanted to create the unevent, the event that,
Right.
Is different from everybody else. This is the event we always wanted to create because it's the one that the practitioners want.
Right.
And I hate to celebrate early, but I think we've nailed it. I mean, I think it's hard to argue that there's anything else out there like this.
Right.
And people walk away at the end of the day saying, wow, I learned a ton. I met a bunch of interesting people who are in similar circumstances. We've got the right balance between, vendors there who are actually offering solutions that people need. They're there to help. And also people who don't want to be harassed the whole day. And it's really an art form. And I think we should be very proud of ourselves, pat ourselves on the back. I think we've achieved the highest level of the art form at this point.
Yeah, I think, I think it has a lot to do with the way that this is not a conference. It's the way that we designed it to be much more interactive. almost like a very large, it was a gathering of a community, right? Versus a, kind of a trade show or a conference. And there's space in the industry for that. B2B Online does a nice job with the conference. And we're partnered with them. And so, but at the end of the day, this is different. This is truly a summit. And one of the big differences here is that it's all focused on content. So we do surveys of our practitioners on a regular basis. We ask them, what are the most important things to you? And we centered the summit's content on those areas. And we talk about, and really where we focused for the summit was on these 4 areas that I'm showing for those of you watching on the screen. I'll talk to them for those on podcast. The organization, right? How do you design the organization? How do you find resources in this world where we have high workforce attrition? Business model. Our practitioners are under more pressure than ever to deliver return on investment for digital investments. So the business model, we spend a lot of time on that. Data. We constantly, are dealing with data problems, constant demand for better hygiene, deeper, broader catalogs. We spend a lot of time talking about that at the summit. And finally, AI, which is fundamentally changing the way that we work. And we talked about some really interesting and fascinating practical use cases. And these are people sharing with one another that are actually doing things in these areas in their business. And that's the magic of really the entire Master B2B community, but it really comes to life at the summit.
Yeah, it's not theoretical. That's the point. It's practical. Like people would say, I'm working on this right now. How do I deal with this right now? And in fact, some people aren't even prepared for how practical it is. Like some people say,
Right.
hey, I have to make a decision in the next 2 weeks about how to move forward on this. What are your thoughts? And these people are on an island. They don't know who to talk to about these things. And so they get together with a bunch of people like us and experts, et cetera. And it makes for a much different event.
For sure. Here was our agenda, and to talk about a couple points out of the agenda that were high points of the event. We had an hour and a half of table topic connections, and these, Andy, were when we had people rotate through tables of about 8 people. Every table had a different topic, and we focused on a variety of different areas. And it was this actually is consistently one of the highest rated sessions at our summit. It was this is the 3rd year we've done the summit, and people want more time. In fact, I joke that some people said, hey, I could do this all day long, because what we're doing is sitting at a table talking about a burning topic. In my case, we're talking about Amazon and Amazon business, and is Amazon a friend or a foe? And in my
answer
case,
is
well, it's frenemy, right? It is. That's the answer. Consistently, it's people recognize that it's an opportunity. Amazon is an opportunity for revenue and profit. It is there's a recognition that it's in, it's an important channel, but there's also a kind of a sober recognition that Amazon can be challenging to work with, and that if it's not controlled correctly, can be a downward spiral on price and brand integrity and things like that. So I was impressed that the people at the tables, we did this, I think 5 or 6 rounds of these consistently were delivering that message. I was a little surprised that people don't necessarily know how big or sort of impressive Amazon business has become. So there's still kind of an underlying, hey, are they really in my business? Or how big is this really? Aren't they just, selling office products? No.
Does it kind of remind you of people who years ago lived in Florida and said, yeah, I heard there's a hurricane coming, but I don't know. I've heard of hurricanes before. Do they really hit? Sometimes they miss.
Right.
And then after the hurricane hits and it levels everything, they're like, God, we saw the warning signs. Why didn't we do something about it? So mine was about where you're going to spend your next dollar. Cool. And what I thought was fascinating was big or small manufacturer or distributor. And there's a lot of variety within there, right? We got pretty consistent answers. And the number one answer, there were 2 that really stood out. And they were the most frequent answers. One was anything related to data. Whether it's PIM, normalizing, standardizing data, harmonizing data, cleaning data, enhancing data, anything data related. And also the e-commerce platform, which was kind of a surprising answer, because we know that people, have kind of slowed their spending a little bit on platforms, but it was about getting the value out of what you've already purchased or enhancing what you already have. But we often forget, even though maybe the economy has slowed a bit, digital has not slowed. There's more
Right.
shift taking place. There's
Yep.
more spending on, there's more digital sales going on. And
Right.
so as a result, digital has to continue delivering, and you can't do that with chewing gum and dental floss.
Right. Right. Yeah, for sure. That's fascinating. And we ran a bunch of other topics too that so we don't have unfortunately time to cover all of them, but these were just robust conversations. We then went into a session called case studies, which we call it been there, done that. And we did 4 different case studies where we highlighted in front of the group some things that companies were doing to make a difference. And they had experience. And the most fascinating, I think they were all fascinating, but one that I wanted to highlight was Eric Rail, a VP of Digital Customer Experience at Schneider Electric. Schneider is a $32 billion manufacturer of electrical products, a global company. And, this was what was fascinating about his, Andy, was that it was a practical AI use case. In other words, again, we think about AI as a shiny object. Well, you know what? It's actually not. It's becoming really an integral part of how people are doing business. His situation, less than 50% of their SKUs at Schneider Electric were e-commerce ready with product information. They couldn't be sold or distributed out to their distributors with full information. And so what they did was they trained an AI bot on PIM data and their technical documentation, and it's incredible. They accelerated their e-commerce data readiness to 75% on 14,000 SKUs. They reduced the time from to 4 weeks from 4 weeks to less than a week. In some cases, 1 day to get product data ready for e-commerce. This is a real tangible outcome and impact. And he cited even some ROI numbers about how it's helped their distributors lift their e-commerce sales. So this is practical application stuff. And I think this generated some really good conversation in the room as well.
Yeah, one theme I think we saw throughout with about AI is that it is not ready to replace things yet, although I think we're going to see that happen at some point. But it is very ready today to accelerate and simplify.
Yeah.
And so in the case of Eric, he said, look, it used to take us weeks and weeks to do this enough. We can do it less than a day, by having AI tear through it. I think we've all had this experience. It's not ready you can't let your hands off the steering wheel, but it is in some particular use cases incredibly powerful at driving something for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, practical. That's what this is all about is finding some practical solutions. We then had executive roundtables. This was kind of the heart of the day. We broke the group up into 4 different sessions in 2 separate sequential session sections. And you and I each ran one. I did with Znode and with Office of Experience. I ran a session on demystifying ROI modeling. And it was fascinating. We ran the session twice in a row, and we talked about, what are some of the elements that e-commerce digital practitioners and leaders can include in their ROI cases? What are some of the challenges they face? And it's fascinating. It's still some of the same. Hey, we got to get over old thinking. My CFO, my C-suite wants everything to be measured and measurable. But, I've got attribution challenges because not everything I do is directly measurable. But, there was some very practical things shared. Like someone said, hey, I include shipping savings. Like this unexpected savings I got from doing better calculation of shipping rates for all my e-commerce orders. I saved like $5 million. And that's something that went into my ROI model. So there were very practical elements shared here. We distributed a workbook, which gave people, something to work with after the event, so that they could take it back and start, using practical benchmarks for calculating their ROI. That was great. 2 great sessions. We had amazing contributions from Marta Dalton, PetSafe, and Eric Rail was in there. John Paler, a former CDO at Rexel, one of our advisors, was in there. So great sessions. What about you, Andy?
Yeah. So in the interest of time, I'll just be very brief. I mean, ours was data to dollars, unifying analytics and personalization, which consistently ranked number 1 and number 2 in our list of priorities for people. And so we thought, hey, let's put them together and see what happens. 1 and 1 could equal 5. And what was fascinating was everybody had a different definition of what analytics was.
Yeah.
And personalization was a completely different story, where people were struggling with how do you personalize to a buying group oftentimes inside of a company. But there was one thing that stood out to me in the analytics discussion, which is this notion of a metric called customer effort.
Mm.
It was something that not many people knew about, talked about, but once it was sort of raised, everybody said, oh yeah, that's something we should be doing. And it's really a measure of the effort it takes a customer from beginning to end to
Interesting.
see your product, to actually buy it. And you
Yep.
know, Amazon spends a lot of time and effort on something similar to that by removing friction along the way.
That's right.
And the thing was, not many people had a measure of it or a formal measure of it. And for those who did, they felt like they were much in the leader category versus the latter category or laggard category. But
That's
that's
fascinating.
not a metric that you hear often. It's not
Oh,
one that people talk about. But I have to, I mean, admit, after hearing people talk about it, it seems like there isn't a metric that's that much more important than
right.
that one. If you're looking at customer experience, obviously they're the harder quantitative metrics that everybody always refers to, like conversion rate, et cetera. But yeah, there were tons of like really interesting insights about how people are actually measuring what's working and not working, and there were some surprises.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating.
We're
So
going to reveal a lot of this stuff over time too. We're going to share this out,
yeah, in fact,
et cetera. Yeah.
we're sharing in our forum, Andy. That's a great point. In our forum, folks who are listening, we are sharing the output and takeaways of all of these sessions over the next couple of weeks. So if you're not a part of our forum and you're interested in the insights that came out of our summit, you need to get onto our forum and sign up. It's free. It's only practitioners. There's no cost. You should join the forum because we're, every day we're publishing more about it. So the perhaps the most highly rated session of all, Andy, was this session we had with CFOs. We weren't sure how this was going to play. We brought in CFOs from a couple of very large companies. One was a public company, one was a private company, and we basically asked them questions about, what the heck does a CFO want to see? How do I win over the CFO? In my digital investment approach and my ROI model and my selling in my business cases. What a fascinating session. We could have gone on for 3 hours. There were so many questions we couldn't get to that the audience had, the attendees had. What did you think, Andy?
Well, people were calling BS in both directions, which is exactly what we wanted.
Right.
One of my favorite lines was the CFO said, just because if you can't justify something, if you can't put a number next to it, you can't just call it strategic,
Right.
which they said they see in presentations all day long.
Right.
And they said the minute we see the word strategic, it tells us very quickly that they don't have any real hard numbers around this. But there was all sorts of stuff. Like one line was the CFO said, you can always get funding for discrete and incremental cash flows. He's like,
Right.
that's easy. You show me discrete and incremental cash flows, I'll show you money.
Right.
Yeah, and then actually one really fascinating point, because one of the CFOs was with a pretty capital intensive business.
Right.
And he said, you got to keep in mind, if you work for a capital intensive business, that's the measure by which everything is going to be judged. And he's like, it could be we spend money on digital, or we spent money on plant, property, and equipment. And you're competing for those dollars with that versus a knowledge business where maybe it's looked at differently. So we got into a back and forth where people were getting very specific. I remember Mita Kratz's question. She works for Lonza, which is a pharmaceutical company, and she went a 3-part question, and everybody was like hanging on every word,
Right.
and it felt more like they were working together. So yeah, this was an absolutely amazing session, and we had rapt attention from the people in the audience. And afterwards, people were like, could you please do that again? And by the way, keep it going.
Right. Yeah. And it's just so many good questions. What is the question Carrie asked? She said, hey, what's the one thing not to include in your deck? Wasn't that one of her last question at the very end there? And it was, don't tell us what tell us what tell us in a very brief way what we need to know, not how much which I thought was pretty interesting. I
had one curiosity that
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had one curiosity that I raised with them. I said, hey, with this high tech stuff, especially AI, let's be honest, you're CFO. You didn't go to school for technology, but you're making decisions. And one of the CFOs was actually also the interim CIO at the company. And I said, how do you move up the learning curve? And to a person, they said, we tinker. We get into
Right.
beta groups. We play around with this stuff. So this is something else that digital people need to understand. If you want to get the CFO on board, bring them into these
Right.
processes, make them a beta tester for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
That's how they're going to learn.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. One of the things that, it wasn't just, learning, it was also fun, an amazing vibe and energy. I heard that yesterday from someone who attended. People were enjoying themselves and learning, and it was a very open and transparent and trusting environment. I think that's also really part of the key. And we really got some great feedback. A fantastic way to meet tons of other folks, talk about relevant topics. This is from a survey we did just this week. We loved the day, had so many different types of sessions. I appreciate the roundtable formats and ability to discuss and hear how industry professionals are tackling the same. We just got a comment in here from Andrew Simpson. Thank you, Andrew. The summit was fantastic with practical discussions on successful strategies for digital programs. Thank you, Andrew, for your comment there. One comment came in on our survey. You guys have a magical ability to facilitate small discussions within a large group. The venue was great, almost nicer than necessary. So, I mean, really just positive feedback across the board. So thank you, everyone. And really what makes this magical is really you. It's not Andy and I, but it's the people that are there. A couple quick announcements because we're past time here. One of the things we did announce at our summit was our Nexus program. Nexus is a brand new program for practitioners. It provides expert advice exclusively for B2B executives. It's, think of it like an analyst type subscription, but it's really peer driven. So when you worked at Forrester, Andy, for a long time, when you have a subscription like that, you call and he gets you in front of an analyst. This is a concierge service that is delivered by us, by Master B2B, but it's through practitioners and experts who have been in your seat and are able to give you guidance on specific issues. We're also doing custom research, custom events just for this group. Again, it's called Nexus. If you're interested in it, let us know. Send us a DM. We'll give you more information. It is a paid service. Couple other quick announcements. Our forum I mentioned, you need to be in there if you are not, because this is where we're sharing all this stuff and continuing the conversation. So go to masterbb.com and go to forum. We have upcoming roundtables also, Andy. We're going across the country, Cleveland, Minneapolis, Charlotte, Cincinnati, LA, a number of other places over the next few months. All that is on our website. Take a look and sign up. It is free for practitioners. And don't forget, folks, our Friday 15 is available in podcast form. So you can listen to our Friday, now 25 while you're doing laundry or whatever things you're working or whatever you're doing. But we're available and portable on the interweb. Just look for us on Spotify, YouTube, Google, or on our website. So, Andy, any final words before we wrap up our very long session today?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing Charlotte and Cincinnati, 2 new markets in April. So looking forward to seeing some new, fresh faces there, and it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, should be great. We'll look forward to seeing everybody. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode next week of Friday 15.